Joining me now from Tel Aviv is Benjamin Anthony, co-founder and CEO of the Miriam Institute. He's also a former combat reservist with the Israeli Defense Forces. Thank you, sir, for your time. I know that you are concerned about the growing support for Hamas that we're seeing here in the United States on college campuses. It's a situation you call problematic. What do you think people are misunderstanding about this situation?
Well, I'm concerned, but I'm unsurprised. Unfortunately, the anti-Israel and, dare I say, anti-Semitic bias has been growing and babbling and stirring and percolating over there in the United States of America, beginning at the level of academia in the university campuses, which were endowed by many, many states that are adversarial towards the state of Israel. And it's particularly concerning because the students of today will be the policymakers of tomorrow. And for too long, they've been educated in environments that are hostile toward Israel, even hostile toward the Jews. That truth manifests itself when we find ourselves in a situation where more than 1,300 people from here in Israel have been murdered in the most brutal, most horrific massacre in recent memory, the most horrific massacre of Jews since the events of the Holocaust, when we have more than 150 of our members of society here being held hostage inside the Gaza Strip, including the elderly, the infirm, the unwell, our women, our children, and possibly even our unborn children, pregnant women potentially having been taken hostage as well. And I absolutely am convinced that the horrors of what Hamas wrought against the people of Israel on October 7th is fundamentally misunderstood by those who are so blinded by their Jew hatred and by their anti-Semitism and their anti-Zionism, which are one and the same. They're so blinded by all of that that they're unable to discern that Israel is on the front line of the battle against unmasked, naked, and revealed evil.
And Israel must fight back, must retaliate against Hamas and the brutal attacks that we saw on October 7th. However, there are innocent lives. Israel does not want to kill Palestinians who cannot escape Gaza.
No, the state of Israel has absolutely no desire. And quite frankly, our leaders and even the upper echelons of our defense establishment have no mandate to target innocent civilians. That's not something we're in the business of doing. Consider for a moment that the Israel Defense Forces is by far the most potent military force in the region. If it wanted to deploy its power indiscriminately, it would have done so not only immediately after these attacks took place, but it would have done so at several opportune moments over the course of recent years, certainly since our disengagement from the Gaza Strip in 2005. We're simply not in the business of doing that. What we are in the business of doing is fashioning a humanitarian corridor that the Palestinian Arabs inside the Gaza Strip can follow and can trace towards an area where they will be safe, where they can take refuge. But we're also in the business right now of taking the fight very, very hard and in a very decisive manner to Hamas in the northern Gaza Strip, specifically around Gaza City and northward, breaching their strongholds, breaking them, toppling them, and as Defense Minister Yoav Gallant has said on more than one occasion, destroying them.
Having these corridors is one thing. Seeing it happen is quite another. What role does Egypt and Lebanon and others play in making sure, and Israel as well, that these areas have access to the people who want to get out and that it's carried through?
So first and foremost, the obstacle to the citizens of the Gaza Strip being able to move to these safer areas, to these ringed off areas, the primary obstacle is, of course, Hamas, which cynically blockades them within their homes, prevents their free movement, and hopes to have them populate the areas that the Israel Defense Forces is going to have to strike, because Hamas hopes to be able to broadcast the loss of innocent civilian life. This is something that they are well practiced at doing. They've done this on several previous occasions, and nobody should be surprised by the fact that they are employing precisely the same depraved mechanisms here when it comes to winning the media war. In terms of the surrounding countries, listen, President Sisi has said that he has no intention of opening the border between Egypt and the Gaza Strip. I'm afraid that that really is not necessarily the requirement of the state of Israel to remedy. What we can do is move the Palestinian Arabs and induce their movement down south where they will be safe, facilitate that movement, bring about that humanitarian corridor, Once they are there, however, I think it would be befitting of their peoplehood to open their gates and to allow them refuge, perhaps in the expanse of the Sinai Peninsula there that abuts the Gaza Strip.
Thank you for watching. Go to newsnationnow.com to find NewsNation on your television provider. And don't forget to click the red subscribe button below to get more of NewsNation's fact-driven, unbiased coverage.